My name is Janice Leamond Cricky, and I am your Master of Ceremonies for tonight's introduction of candidates who will be contesting their seats in the upcoming general elections. Welcome to all our viewers, both local and international, the Progressive Empowerment Party members and candidates. Please be advised that this presentation has been edited to fit within the 1-hour time slot. To get the proceedings on the way, I would like to introduce the chairman of the Progressive Empowerment Party, Felicia Holder.
Thank you for that very warm introduction, Janice. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. We're back at it again. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Progressive Empowerment Party's presentation of our second batch of candidates. This evening, I am addressing you as the chairman of the Progressive Empowerment Party, and let me start off by saying, oh my wow, I am absolutely blown away. We in the Progressive Empowerment Party, we are absolutely blown away by the outpouring of support and the overwhelming response that we have received on our launch of candidates, which took place just 1 week ago. Since then, we have gotten so many calls, so many messages from people reaching out, wanting to volunteer, join, donate. And I have to say, I'm extremely grateful for all of your support, and I would like to encourage you to continue lending us your support all the way through the general election campaign. When I reflect on this 3.5-year journey in the Progressive Empowerment Party, I think about that analogy that we use to describe ourselves, which is that this is like building a boat while out at sea. And sometimes when you're busy building a boat, busy rowing that boat, busy steering that boat, it is often easy to lose sight of just how far you have gotten. And I stand in awe today at just what we have accomplished, what this movement has blossomed into. What started as a mustard seed by a group of ordinary citizens who simply wanted better for their politics, for their country. I remember me at 28 years old making my way down to 19 Stanmore Avenue on the 18th of January 2017, frustrated, fed up, ready to give up, but still holding on to that glimmer of hope that Trinidad and Tobago could actually be the paradise that I have always envisioned it to be. 2 months later, I found myself appointed as the interim chairman of the Progressive Empowerment Party. I had finally come to the point of understanding that I needed to be the change that I wanted to see. That change that the Progressive Empowerment Party has held on to for the past 3.5 years, living the example that we want to set in government. We say that we want to stay away from deep pocket finances, and we've managed to do it. We have built this movement, one member, one supporter, one donation at a time, offering ourselves as a real change that this country has never seen before. Building on that analogy of a ship at sea, the Progressive Empowerment Party represents a beacon of hope for this nation. It is on that foundation that we have built our 21 policies which aim at providing hope and opportunity to all of Trinidad and Tobago. We say that a rising tide lifts all boats. Looking around now at depressed communities like Mova, Beetham, and Laventille, I ask myself, and I want you to ask yourself, why is it that they have a different standard of living? They have different living situations in comparison to communities just 10 minutes away, like Woodbrook, West Moorings, and St. James. We in the Progressive Empowerment Party want to level that playing field. We want to make it so that a resident of Mova can live comfortably, so that a resident from the Beetham can afford their own home, and that a resident from Laventille can send their child to a prestige school in Laventille. The Progressive Empowerment Party represents an end to racist, tribalist voting. Our party slogan is one people under one flag. I look at die-hard UNC communities and die-hard PNM communities and I ask myself, what do you have to show for 58 years of voting, race, and tribalist politics? Our party color is orange. We say meet us in the middle where red and yellow merge. The Progressive Empowerment Party wants to bring an end to failed systems of government. We want to undo and redo every system that has failed in our nation. I mean, look at local government, an absolute waste of time and failure. We say that we want to decentralize government to the constituency, allowing a constituency like Diego Martin Central or San Fernando West to manage their own health care, public works, public utilities, education, and security within their constituency borders. We say that the well-being of the citizens is the reason, purpose, and function of government. Opening your taps to get water 24/7, that is the reason you have government. Securing this nation's borders so that guns, drugs, and human trafficking does not run rampant, that is the purpose of government. Ensuring that 100% of our nation's children can attend prestige schools is a function of government. We want to be the real change like this country has never seen before. I said it in my candidacy speech last week that we don't want to be the exchange that the UNC is selling you. In a couple days, a couple weeks time, both the PNM and the UNC are going to come and pander for your vote on another 5 years of promises that they could not live up to in the past 58. We want to be that change like you have never seen before, because you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, deserve so much better. But it's not enough to just say that we deserve better though. It is time that we get actively involved in making that a reality. There's a Chinese proverb that goes, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is now. The country that you want to see is on the other side of your support and your vote. Get involved, sign up, volunteer, donate, be a part of this change, and most importantly, vote the Progressive Empowerment Party in the upcoming general elections and create the country that you want to see. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Kezia Rampal, who is the Education Advisor on the Progressive Empowerment Party Advisory Council. Kezia is certified from the Ontario College of Teachers and has a master's in education. She also speaks fluent French and Spanish. She believes that her purpose as a teacher is to inspire every child to reach his or her own potential, and that education is life itself.
Thank you, Janice. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. What a great time to be here. Out with the old, in with the new. So why the Progressive Empowerment Party? You know, I really like looking up different quotes. They get the point across and you don't have to say too much. Let me share some of my favorite quotes with you. One people under one flag. The well-being of the citizenry is the sole function and purpose of the government. Another one of my absolute favorite quotes is education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. Let me tell you what life is like under our present education system. This is what some of our teachers and our parents had to say. And I quote, I stress out, my child stress out, the teacher stress out. The SEA puts undue stress on our students. They suffer from test anxiety and they underperform. I think students should have access to basic necessities like soap and toilet paper. How are we supposed to give special attention to those who need it when we have to teach 38 at a time? This is life under our education system. Horrible, eh? It's stressful. It's real stressful. I ain't gonna lie. I was there at one point in time, and I had to deal with some of these things. So how do we fix it? In a snapshot, the Progressive Empowerment Party will create a supportive learning environment. That means we will reduce class sizes to under 22. We all know the horrors of teaching students in a class of 40. We packed up in there like sardines. Eliminating the pressure of a summative based exam like SEA means that we can focus on useful skills like organization, being responsible, becoming independent, all these things that are useful for the 21st century. Furthermore, assessments. Assessments will be used as a data collection tool where teachers will be able to tweak instruction based on students' needs and interests. We will determine where students are in their learning, where they need to be, and how best to get there. The Progressive Empowerment Party is advocating for 80% formative, 20% summative. If you take a more formative approach, you'll be able to focus on the learning process and the continuous development of the student. With less children in the classroom, the teacher will be able to give descriptive feedback. That means you don't have to wait to the end of the term for the teacher to tell you, excellent, good job, fair, do better. And when you get out on your test paper, well, you want to ask Miss, well, how to do better, Miss? I don't know how to do better. So we are saying 80% formative, 20% summative. You see, if you're taking a more formative approach, you'll be able to focus on the learning process. You'll be able to focus on the continuous development of the student. What does that look like? A one-on-one conference with your teacher, telling you what needs to be done and how to get there. And from there, you start the process of being able to self-assess. You become responsible for your own learning. You become an independent learner, and that is the goal of that is the goal of education, for you to become an independent, critical thinking person. At the end of the day, Trinidad and Tobago, if you vote for the Progressive Empowerment Party, we will fix it all. Let me shift gears for a minute. I want to speak to the youth of this nation. I want to speak to the sixth formers. I want to speak to the new graduates. I want to speak to the tertiary level students. I want to speak to the entrepreneurs. I want to speak to the young entrepreneurs. I want to speak to the artists, the musicians. I am appealing to you to rescue this country. We need a saving grace. That saving grace is you. You are the open-minded, critical thinkers in this. You are the open-minded, critical thinkers in this country. Current and past leaders have communicated to you that they do not care about you. Look at this country. Where is the sustainable development that would ensure your bright futures? Where is your technology-based sector? You can't even get Wi-Fi in your school. This country is $31 billion in debt and counting. Make no mistake, you will pay. Not your grannies and your grandpa, not your mommy and your daddy, not your aunties and your uncle, but you. They have been misled for 58 years, but you can change that. Your past and current leaders have made a bed of despair for you to lie in. Do not lie in that bed. Stand with the Progressive Empowerment Party on August 10th. Make your voices heard. Be that change for Trinidad and Tobago. Be that saving grace. Save your own future. Vote for the Progressive Empowerment Party.
Hi, my name is Gary Aboud. I have a serious message tonight for those who choose to listen. I've been involved in social justice and civil society movements to protect the environment, but also to protect the poor and disenfranchised, the voiceless. And over the past 25 odd years, what I've learned is that in the political landscape, both the red and yellow really are more interested, as the head of the Chamber of Commerce has said, in raiding the treasury, in satisfying their own pockets, and not just necessarily in public interest work. Now, Fitzgerald Hines is a great guy and is a great lawyer, but he sits in a party that have had a disastrous reputation for decades of raiding the treasury. Kamala's government has raided the treasury, $6 million to tow out a fire engine. And the new government, they spent $85 million to change the roof of the president's house. The house is still the same. They didn't do anything to the house. The furniture is the same as the roof. A wooden roof to a steel roof. Now, I'm not saying that it's not beautiful in the outcome, but look at how much they spend. Lack of accountability. Where is the tendering process? And that is not going to change because we have a democratic dictatorship. The prime ministers, based on our constitution, rule with an iron hand that cannot be challenged. And unless we change the constitution, which has been promised by all of the red and blue, yellow, but they've never done anything, not a single thing, to amend or to consider consultation of changes to our constitution. They pass the Procurement Act, but they don't pass the regulation, so they could continue to raid the treasury while the poor suffer. I mean, we who are fortunate and privileged to have a telephone and to be able to listen to this recording are privileged. But there are many who are suffering, who are orphaned, who suffer the consequence of neglect of a society that has shown itself to be heartless. All I'm saying is give someone else a chance. There are young upcoming political parties who have worked hard in the public interest, have made statements and promises that can be held to, and even if they do not have a landslide, give them a chance. It cannot be an evil thing to change from a political entity that has a proven track record of raiding the treasury to a political entity that has no track record and that have made promises of constitutional reform, updated legislation, public consultation, a whole process of public participation in the way that the country is managed and governed. I beg you, I pray, please consider giving someone else a chance. The Red have raided the economy from Eric Williams to today. There are so many. Just go and read about P&M corruption, and there's an encyclopedia of mishaps that have occurred, of cover-ups where prime ministers buy ships at inflated prices in Australia. No public consultation. The Coast Guard didn't even want the ships. Hundreds of millions of dollars blown. And what kickbacks? We don't know. All covered up. We don't know. We don't know. Because there's no public transparency. There's no public consultation. Please, I beg you, give someone else a chance. Give someone else a chance. Thank you for listening. God be with you all.
I'd like to introduce Benison Jagasa as the candidate for the constituency of San Fernando West. Benison has made many contributions to the National Forum on Constitutional Reform, Educational Innovations, Crime Prevention, and Poverty Eradication. Mr. Jagasa comes with international experience, being a British-trained researcher and a poverty eradication expert from the United Kingdom. He is the holder of degrees from the United States and the United Kingdom and is currently pursuing his PhD in leadership and social change. Other local, regional, and international awards have been conferred on him for his contribution to education and national development in Trinidad and Tobago. Thousands of people have gained from his knowledge, insightful vision of the holistic solutions provided by his company, the Polytechnic of the West Indies, LLC, a consultancy firm. I would like to introduce Bennett Thomas as the candidate for the constituency of La Hocata, Talparo. Bennett is a retired civil engineer and has many years of experience as a sportsman. He has taken part in many shooting events representing the West Indies in the United Kingdom and Canada. He has also represented Trinidad in Australia. Bennett is the first West Indian to have won the Caribbean Championship 3 consecutive years. He migrated to the US in the 1990s and has now returned to Trinidad to assist in the struggle to make Trinidad and Tobago a better place to live. Next, I'd like to introduce Gail Castaneda as the candidate for the constituency of Port of Spain South. Gail was born and raised on Nelson Street. She successfully completed a diploma in technical vocational teacher training at the MIC Institute of Technology. She assists with the planning and execution of carnival and recreational events in the community and at her place of employment. She recognizes and identifies with the hardships that a community face on a daily basis. Gail displayed her leadership skills by collaborating with various supermarkets and NGOs for the supply of food hampers during the COVID-19 lockdown and brought relief to those persons who had been affected in some way, either through unemployment or simply devoid of basic amenities. Gail assists with the non-profit organization called Is We Developers, where she gained respect and admiration within the community, assisting them with various initiatives. I would like to introduce Robert Matthew Gibbs as the candidate for the constituency of Chaguanas East. Robert comes from a business-oriented background. His grandparents were the Gabriels, founders of Gabriel's Automotive and Mechanical Engineering Limited. His passion is to help others and help build families who may need that sort of intervention in their lives. He will give wholeheartedly without expectation, simply because he believes that people achieve what they were destined to, but sometimes need a little encouragement and direction. I would like to introduce Maurice Downs as the candidate for the constituency of Tunapuna. Maurice's background is in information technology, educating himself from beginner level all the way to network administration and implementation. Having lost his father at age 9, he has grown to appreciate the effort and work put out by his mother and learned to understand the value of family, building and nurturing relationships, having respect for his elders, and always putting his best foot forward in any endeavor he sets out to achieve.
My fellow countrymen, good night, and thank you for joining us on this second presentation of candidates for the Progressive Empowerment Party. My name is Hadassah Charles McLeod. I am the co-chair of the Women's Arm and a regular citizen of this beautiful country, Trinidad and Tobago. I consider it an honor to address you tonight because in the scheme of things, I am a nobody, just a regular citizen who recognizes that the time for change, real tangible change, is now. Voting is a very personal thing, and I don't believe there are any reasons I can give anybody as to why they should vote the Progressive Empowerment Party. But perhaps I can share with you some reasons that I found appealing and why it is I wanted to align myself with this powerful movement. Everything about the PEP is people-centered and family-focused, and it is led by a great humanitarian who spends hours of his life trying to improve the lives of persons who have fallen through the cracks of society. Philip Edward Alexander understands that the way to fix this country is to restore the family unit and to knit communities together, because a country is a collection of communities, a community is a collection of families. When I read PEP policies, it was clear to me how the implementation of just one would considerably improve my life. Policies like securing our nation's borders, that meant to me that I could feel safe in my home and that I could go about my days doing business and meeting friends or whatever. I could do that safely, confidently, happily. Things like home ownership for all. That meant that an individual like me, I could qualify for a mortgage. Even though right now banks think that my income is laughable. But the Progressive Empowerment Party says, once you have a job and you want to own a home, you could own a home. That was mind-blowing to me. Another one is food independence by way of farming and agriculture, which means that produce and food would now be affordable again, so that when I go to the grocery, my food bill would make sense and I wouldn't have to pay $20 for an avocado. It is clear to me that the Progressive Empowerment Party is determined to improve the quality of life of every citizen and to make the words of our national anthem true again. Here, every creed and race find an equal place. So this decision for me was a no-brainer. Join me. To save TNT, vote PEP.
Up next, I would like to introduce the political leader of the Progressive Empowerment Party, Philip Edward Alexander.
Thank you very much, Janice Lemon Cricky, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for the human service you did to all of the contributors tonight, our candidates, our speakers. Thank all of you who are watching again the second broadcast of our presentation of candidates. Today's a little bit different. Today, we've learned this weekend that an election has been called, that August 10th, the 12th Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago will be voted into office. So, what exactly do we intend to happen in this country over the next 5 weeks? What exactly do we think is going to be said by all the political parties? The two major political parties both have had office for years between them, one less than the other, both with sufficient time to have made massive change in this country, and neither has done so. You met one of the candidates you met tonight was the candidate for Port of Spain South, and in conversations with her, listening to what took place in her constituency this week, my heart breaks for Port of Spain South. Bullets falling on houses with children sleeping. And to some of us who don't know the type of poverty and squalor, the abandonment Port of Spain South, communities like Morfa, Beetham, Laventille, Sealots feel, because the condition of those people is not their fault, as much as we would like to blame them. The game that we play in Trinidad and Tobago is name, shame, and blame. But I helps no one. I watched police square off with citizens, and all I saw were victims. I watched victims facing victims. The people of Port of Spain South and those all through the country who were rioting, they were rioting because they were fed up and they were frustrated, and rightly so. Because this is a democracy. But our democracy is a lie. Because no government, no UNC, no PNM or version of themselves have ever seen it fit to make it a proper democracy. After Eric Williams constructed the socialist dictatorship that he did, that gives you one vote every 5 years to fool you, you didn't realize you can't fire them. And that's the problem. This is a country that has misspent over $3 trillion. And all the people of this country should be better off for it. Where is it? A lot of what we have in Trinidad and Tobago was built by the colonial masters that left these shores August 31st, 1962. TNTEC and Wassa and Caroni and the cocoa industry, most of our roads, all of our city gate infrastructure, all of that was built by the Queen and the King and the Prince and the Princess and all of the royal family who were in charge of Trinidad and Tobago. So what did we do with our $3 trillion? Central Bank Towers, Mount Hope. What did we do? Because when you go and you look at what we got for the money that we spent, you realize that Trinidad and Tobago has to be the corruption capital of the world. And why? In all the 58 years of rampant corruption, criminal governments, white-collar criminality, drug trafficking, Trinidad and Tobago had a drug commission of inquiry, Justice Scott Commission of Inquiry, that named senior members of very high office in this country. So damning was that report, it could not be laid in Parliament for fair. It would throw down the country. And we've done nothing since. I personally have interviewed a Prime Minister and many former ministers, a former Attorney General, and none of them could admit what exactly has been done since the Scott drug report, despite the fact that this country has shipped billions of dollars of cocaine around the world, and despite the fact that we found billions of dollars worth of cocaine here, and we don't grow cocaine in Trinidad and Tobago. And despite the fact that we have 50,000 illegal weapons in the country, but we don't manufacture guns here. Something goes on in Trinidad and Tobago that we don't talk about in polite company, that is killing people. The bullets that came from high-powered machine guns in Port of Spain and environs all of last week, those guns cost $50, $75, $100,000. How did these people who could barely make it day to day end up with those guns in their possession? How? When the Prime Minister told the nation that he knew that there were 37,000 guns in the country in 2017, I asked, who did the stock check? How do you know? How do you have such a random but specific total? When the Minister of National Security in the same month told the nation that 57 women were trafficked, I asked again, how do you know this? Where is the evidence upon which the statement was made, and why is no action being taken? Look, what is about to happen in the next couple of weeks is an election for a parliament. Many people don't know what a parliament is because our schools teach us nonsense. Trinidadians that used to have the highest standard of education up in the world up to the 70s now teach our children absolute nonsense. They leave school functionally illiterate. 7,000 of the 20,000 children who do SE every year fail out of the system, go from the classroom to the jail cell, or somewhere in between. And we're not talking about these things because everybody in Trinidad and Tobago is on a hustle. The government is on a hustle, finances of the government is on a hustle. Everybody seems to be out for number one. And nobody's looking at the country as a whole and the fact that it's sinking fast. Prior to COVID-19, this economy was so badly broken. Economists were saying that there's very little hope for Trinidad and Tobago. Post COVID-19, after what was left was further broken, and there's so few places left in the world for us to turn to for help. What does Trinidad and Tobago do? We announce more make-work schemes and massive projects that we do not need. The government announced a project in Diego Martin of overpasses and bypasses that nobody understands why and nobody wants. We don't need all of this and we can't afford it now, so why are we doing it? The Progressive Empowerment Party tells you if you capture, hold, treat and distribute the water, you won't need to spend $500 million a year on desalinated water. We're not thinking it through. We're not realizing that the government is responsible for the problems that we have. And when you realize that the government is responsible for the problems that we have, then you realize how important your vote is and how important a party like the Progressive Empowerment Party is. Because unlike all the other parties that will come and talk to you during the course of this election, we have real plans and real policies. So many real plans and so many real policies that would actually work. All the other parties are parroting us. Prior to January 18, 2017, none of them knew a lot of the things that they talk about now. Prior to us launching with our sneak peek at our manifesto. The Progressive Empowerment Party says it's time for real change. What is real change? Real change is people understanding what the parliament is for. 1.4 million of us can't fit in the Red House, so we're allowed to send one representative from each constituency of about 35,000 people to the Red House. So we do that, and that's why it's called the House of Representatives. 41 constituencies in this country are represented in that parliament. And out of those 41 representatives, a government is supposed to be elected. Not the way we do it, not the way it's going to be done. We operate on lies. Everything in this country is dysfunctional. Nothing works as it is meant to. Nothing works as we say they do. The laws that we have are not the laws that are enforced and are not the laws that guide us, because this is not a real country. But the parliament is supposed to house the House of Representatives that sit and meet and discuss the needs of all the people of this country with constituencies individually and collectively. But that's not what's done. We look at Parliament channel and all we get is bacchanal and old noise. Accusations of theft and more theft flung at both sides, with neither having the audacity to defend themselves against what's plain to be seen. That a school is about to be built in Tobago that's going to cost us $200 million, and in a real world it wouldn't cost 20. But this is Trinidad and Tobago, and theft is sanctioned by the government. We spent $500 million renovating a building that existed in the place of the Red House. We spent $108 million renovating President's House. For that money, we could have built President's House over about 5 times. Of that $108 million, we spent $17 million on a $2 million cottage. Now tell me if any of that makes sense. Remember when we spent $5 million to pull up a fire engine that's not worth $500,000? And nobody went to jail. And nobody was arrested. Nobody was investigated. Nobody was charged. The chief fire officer didn't know. And the person who gave the instruction didn't know either. The person who received the contract said, this is what we charge. And we pay those bills. Our education system fails about 80% of the people who go to school. And we don't speak about that because the people who make the most noise, their children go to prestige schools, whether they earn the place or not. Because we have a SEA exam that can be rigged, that you could get your children's name on a list and bypass the SEA exam, begging the question, what's the point of the SEA exam in the first place? You heard our education advisor tell you that exams such as that develop anxiety in 10 and 11-year-old children. Now, why would we want to do that? There's no purpose or reason for the competition, save and except to say that you have the bling of a prestige school. Why would we have prestige schools if all our schools are on the same curriculum, get the same funding, have teachers from the same teachers training college, and operate under the same Ministry of Education? Is it that that whole collective could only make 20% of our school facilities functional and the devil could take the rest? And how come we don't talk about that anywhere in the parliament? How come we're not talking in the parliament about the ease with which 57 women were trafficked and the ease with which 37,000 illegal guns in 2017 became 50,000 illegal guns by 2020? And how come we're not talking about that? How come we're not talking about the conditions of the people in the at-risk and the depressed communities as if we don't give a damn? How come? And what do we expect to happen when at last whatever credit and borrow and beg and steal we have runs out, when you realize 60% of the people in Tobago are paid a salary by the THA to do nothing but vote PNM? What happens when you do not have the $2.5 billion to give them? What happens to Tobago? What happens to the 80% of transfers and subsidies of our budget that goes to make handouts for people? What happens when you have no jobs for them, no structure for them, and that money runs out? What happens then? Do we send our 6,000 police to shoot them when they riot, when they get hungry? What's the plan here? And what's the government telling you? And I want to ask tonight, Keith Rowley, why a snap election? You had until December. What happened to make you run to the parliament this Friday and dissolve it? What? What panicked you? What said to you that from the Chamber of Commerce down and from the hotspots and at-risk communities up, all of Trinidad and Tobago is fed up of the nonsense that has passed for government in this country for 58 years? The Progressive Empowerment Party is presenting candidates to you, people that most of you have never heard about before. Because a parliament is supposed to be representatives of the people, not stunt artists, not footballers and cricketers and radio personalities and anybody that they could bring to distract you. A parliament is supposed to be made up of people from the community who understands the needs of the community so that they could come and stand up in the parliament and speak for the community. That's not what happens when you put people like JW and Blaze. Because they're not from the constituency they're running for. And even if they are, they're not political. They're not activists. They have no idea the role of a parliamentarian. And most of them sit down inside the parliament taking notes from the chief whip on what to speak. So the parliament is dysfunctional, malfunctional, non-functional, and the country continues to fail. So where do we go Who do we turn to when we realize that our water system, our water management system, was created to fail so that the Salcott and Karamat and all of the investors in the Salcott could benefit from the $500 million a year we spend on desalinating water that we do not need? It is a literal obscenity that we take the bounty of rainwater that falls on this country and wash it out to sea, only to bring seawater in to desalinate it at a cost. That is insanity. For 10% of the money that we spend desalinating water every year, we could repurpose our water catchment facilities, make retention ponds, develop lakes, and hold water that falls from the sky for free and save the $500 million. The same way we told you building the jails, building the courts outside the jails would save us the $80 to $100 million we spend transporting nickel and dime prisoners. There is a way to run this country where everybody could have a hope and a future. But running this country where bandit organizations run rampant through the treasury and steal whatever they could get their hands on is not the way to do that. There are issues important to everybody. Not everybody wants to get into politics and not everybody wants to get into government, but everybody wants a home. And everybody wants to be able to feed their family. And everybody wants water in their tap so they could take a shower and make a cup of tea. And everybody wants to put their children through school so that they have a chance at maximizing their best potential somewhere along the road of life. And everybody wants adequate health care in case of emergency. Everybody wants affordable cost of living, affordable food, the ability to save some money, to go on a vacation, to maybe buy a car. Everybody wants these simple, normal, everyday things that go to make up a life, and we don't provide it. Our public health system in this country, despite the fact that we spend over $5 billion on it every year, fails us completely. We create casualty departments and tell all the people to rush there when you have an emergency, when we could have created 41 public health centers operating 24 hours, 7 days a week in each constituency for a percentage of that money and provide people with real health care in case of an emergency. Our ambulance system makes no sense. It's a private contract and it makes no sense. We've centralized our ambulance service. Instead of putting 2 ambulances in every fire station throughout the 41 constituencies, 82 ambulances would operate this country and give everybody a chance at a medical intervention in 15 minutes or less. Let's talk justice. Because the country is waiting on the PCA to investigate what looked like a murder, what looked like police shooting unarmed people. And we don't know if that is the whole sum total of what took place, but we have a right to know, especially the families of those people. Now, in Trinidad, we might be tempted to say, but they're criminals and they're bad boys and they're good boys and they're all kind of boys that we want to say about them. But the United States has ground to a halt over a serial bandit, George Floyd, because his life matters and everybody's life matters. If you live in a country that you say is a republic, because a republic is a nation ruled by law, then let the law work. So if you send 30 police in to collect 3 people, then arrest them and take them before the courts and let the courts decide if you were right. The Progressive Empowerment Party proposes a justice system that respects the rights of all people. That the police service should be mandated on arrest. You have 24 hours to hold somebody and either charge them or release them by law. So that you can't detain people without end requiring lawyers to file habeas corpus motions. 24 hours from arrest to charge or release. If you charge, 6 months from charge or to prosecution or release. If you prosecute, and we use numbers like 3 years for civil matters and 5 years for criminal matters, and criminal attorneys tell us that's way too long. That from the time a matter begins, it shouldn't take more than 1 year. So why can't we do it in a year? Why can't we say that judges should have responsibility for case management and let's put a timer on each case, put a clock on it, so that needless adjournments don't need to happen. And if a lawyer stands up and say, Your Honor, Sergeant so-and-so was supposed to be here to give evidence, and he isn't, we would like an adjournment, and the judge checks with a clerk or clerk, and the clerk or the clerk says, this is the 3rd time this sergeant has been absent, the judge could issue a bench warrant and send the marshals to pick up the sergeant and bring him in to give evidence. or release. Because citizens' rights are more important than any politician and anybody's view of their own personal self. We cannot continue to do law enforcement and justice like bullies and thugs. Our system has to work. In our jails, it's packed with people who, if they had pled guilty to the crime they were arrested for, would have left jail years less than how long they're there. The UNC government created a law called Section 34 ostensibly to deal with that, and somehow managed to forget to include in those matters that weren't covered by it a prohibition against white-collar crimes, so that their finances were the first out the gates to try to benefit from it, causing a response that repealed the very law that they went to the parliament to say that would solve this. Now we live in a country where, according to our constitution, the president of the republic can have all of the people who are in jail longer than they should be brought to court, plead guilty, and pardon all. The chief justice could have all of them brought to court, have them plead guilty, and sentence them to time served. The DPP could vacate all matters, and in a pinch, the commissioner of police could drop all charges. That's the reality of where we are, and yet we have people packed in a cage and don't understand why. At some point, they're going to lose hope, lose faith, lose respect for any system. What are we going to do when it's not a stunt? What are we going to do if it ever becomes a reality where people just don't care anymore? I think we're forcing them into that position, and I think we need to backpedal and treat all of our people in this country with dignity and respect in every circumstance. We talk public health. I have shown, we've been on radio shows and we've explained to people that an ambulance call, from the moment you make an ambulance call in New York City, from the time the person at the call center answers the phone, the call center operator is liable for you. From the moment the call is connected between the paramedics and the ER room, they share joint liability, and the ER rushes out to take you out of that ambulance they call a bus. And they rush because they have a liability now for you. They have to either treat and discharge you or admit you to hospital and pass the liability and the responsibility over to the admitting hospital nurse. And if you die at any point along the way, your loved ones could trigger something called a mortality conference, and an investigation could be launched from the phone call to the moment you were pronounced dead. From the moment the call center operator took that call, from that moment, your life was literally in their hands. In Trinidad and Tobago, we slice open fetuses while doing cesarean sections and call it oops. We send women to hospitals to die in Trinidad and Tobago, and nobody knows why. We've had situations and circumstances in our public health system, like Christopher Phillip rolling around and dying on the grounds of the General Hospital, and nobody, not the hospital administrator, not the CEO of the Regional Health Authority, not the Minister of Health, nobody took responsibility. In a real country, all three would have been fired. Now, why can't Trinidad and Tobago be a real country? I'll tell you why. Because we play this revolving door change exchange of PNM, UNC, and everybody thinks that you will watch the media give you Kamala's face and Keith Rowley's face and say that's the race to the Whitehall. We don't even want to race to Whitehall. We want a race to the Red House. We want to convene the parliament with a government that represents the people, that will give you real representation in the parliament, that will bring up the issues that most affect you, that will create a legal affairs division, that will go into all our laws and repeal or amend what needs repealing or amending. We have a system of governance in Trinidad and Tobago where nothing works. If you have a problem and you are done wrong, unless you are part of the ruling class and the 1%, there's nobody for you to turn to, and nobody really has to care, except maybe 5 weeks of the election when they're going to stunt and pretend that you matter. Think it through. If they could deliver service to you over the next couple of weeks, trying to get your vote, why couldn't they have done it for all the years, the 4.5 years they've been in government? It's time, Trinidad and Tobago, for us to make some decisions that takes us from third world banana republic cesspool to first world developed nation. We use the comparisons of Norway, Dubai, and Singapore because those countries started off not too long ago. And Norway now has $1 trillion in their Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And Dubai, in the middle of a desert, has water 24/7. It's one of the richest countries in the world. And not on oil and gas, on shipping, like Singapore. It's one of the largest providers of services to the world. A country, a quarter the size of Trinidad and Tobago, whose economy is about 20 times the size of ours. They have a GDP of 322 billion. Ours is barely 22 billion pre-COVID-19. I shudder to think what it might be now. And that 22 billion US a year was based on a time when we had an oil and gas industry and a petrotrend. We live in a Trinidad and Tobago where life sport and AV oil and email gate and all these things are just swept under. All the gates are closed. The commissioner tells us the gates are closed and nobody's brought to justice. How could that be when our jails are full of people who have served more time than they should have for crimes that they really should not be committing? And a lot of those crimes that they're being charged for are crimes caused by poverty and political abandonment. We talk Morva, Beetham, Lavantil, Sealots, Never Dirty, Gonzales, Cocorite, Harding Place, Waterhole. Go to places like Hague Street, Abbey Pujat, Big Yard, Patna, River Estate, Foston Trace in Maraval, in Paramin. Go and see how these people live. Go to Point Commander, go to St. Peter's. Go and see what 58 years of change exchange has done to people. Drive into Cocorite. Drive in, across the road from Bayside Towers, where one apartment sells for about $8 million, and everything in Cocorite is worth $8 million. And ask yourself why that might be so. We've done our people wrong. There are two sayings that I wrote down to bring to you. And one of those sayings is, children who are not embraced by the village will eventually burn it down to feel its warmth. That's an African proverb. There's another saying, all that is required for evil to prosper is that good people do nothing. Trinidad and Tobago, this election before us is the mother of all elections. This party, the Progressive Empowerment Party, based solely on policy. If there was no race card in this country, and if we got the media time that we were entitled to, because we pay for this media time that you're seeing us on now, but if we got the media time that we were entitled to, that everybody else gets, then I think that by now there'd no longer be a need for PNM or UNC, especially if there was no race card. If people had to vote for political parties based strictly on delivery, on politics, on policies, on programs, on ideas, on track records of the political leaders, without ever having held office, I delivered a highway bypass that has saved thousands of man hours for thousands of people. It must be millions of man hours by now. I have been instrumental in assisting the orphans, the homeless, the disabled in getting a better quality of life. We've suggested, and a Progressive Empowerment Party government would make sure all seated jobs like customer service representatives in all the state agencies would be reserved first for people confined to wheelchairs. Because nothing wrong with their minds, they just can't walk. And why we can't make it so that they have a chance at a real life too? Why should we build this whole country on creating ways and means for people to fail and then giving them handouts and blaming them for it? Up to the 70s, we had the highest standard of education in the world. What did the PNM do? What was this PNM education that people keep boasting about? Those of us who were fortunate to go to one of the prestige schools, those weren't built by the PNM. Everything else that fails was. And the UNC came along and decided, hey, if they could get away with it, why not do that too? So that the entire country now is built around a failed education system where teachers are not motivated to teach because the children in the classes are not motivated to learn. So the entire teacher-student environment relationship is turned upside down on its head and it doesn't work. So at the end of the 5 years that the children spend in secondary education is wasted time. And they come to adulthood with needs and drives and no way to fulfill them. Where do we get crime? We're making it. You want a better country? You're going to have to vote for it. If you think that our water policy will work, then you have to ask the other two parties, why didn't you do this? If you think securing the nation's borders will end the drug trade and the gun trade, if you think that providing hope and opportunity to all the people of the country would give everybody a chance to develop and give us functional communities upon which to build a first world country, if you think that that would work, then why would you even consider either of the two parties that have done nothing for nobody except their friends and financiers for all of the last 58 years? Look around Trinidad and Tobago. There's not one project that has been done in this country in at least the last 40 years that has not been riddled with allegations of massive corruption, overruns, and theft. Why might that be so? Why has not one of the people responsible gone to jail? Why not even an investigation? Why no prosecution? Is it that the entire superstructure of our government is set up to facilitate white-collar criminality? Or is it massive incompetence? And both are sufficient reason for you to reject anything that the PNM and the UNC might want to say to you right now. Kamala is going to bring you a lot, a pie in the sky. Raul too. Raul is going to take credit for the sun. Kamala is going to take credit for the moon. Neither of them are going to be able to explain what they did with their term in office. They'll tell you they put up lights and they built schools and they built hospitals. What did they do to functionally improve your lives and that of your children? And if you look around and you see nothing but underdevelopment and failure, where a first world developed nation should be, then at election time you have to give yourself a better chance. And you need to vote yourself a political movement built on people, by people, for the people. If you want a better country, this election, vote PEP.
See you next week Sunday as we continue our presentation of candidates. This has been a PEP Media production. Good night and stay safe, Trinidad and Tobago.